parents hanging half 100 on them at Owen Field, or the run rules on the diamond at Love's Field. We're giving you the breakdowns, the bets, and the hot takes from the perspective of two former OU Athletics employees. You're listening to the Mainline Podcast with Tyler Burton and Adam Jaquaize.
Let's go! Let's go!
Let's go. Welcome to the Main Line. He's Tyler Burton. I'm Adam Jaquaize. Today we're going through the offensive preview for the entire season. We're going to go position group by position group, starting with quarterback. I guess we'll end with kicker. If we have some time, we'll talk a little special teams there. But Tyler, welcome in. How are you this evening?
Season 5, Episode 1, Adam. 23 days away from kickoff. Oklahoma getting back on the field to kick off the 2024 season against Tipple on a Friday night on Owen Field. 23 days from now, fall practice is underway in full swing. Got the pads coming out, I believe, tomorrow. Guys are going to get after it on the practice field, but things are good, man. Got a little bit of taste of football last week. We had the Thursday night Hall of Fame game in the NFL with the Bears and the Texans. So that football itch, it's alive and well. I'm trying to scratch as much as humanly possible. But yeah, things are good, Adam, out here in Denver, Colorado. And yeah, let's just kind of dive into it, man. I'm excited. This is the best time of year when college football season gets going, NFL following shortly behind it. And year one of the SEC, baby. There's a lot to be excited about. There's a lot to be excited about with this Oklahoma offense, and I'm excited to talk about it tonight.
Absolutely. We'll start with the quarterback position. Of course, Jackson Arnold, the presumed starter for Oklahoma. And I think kind of the big question there is, like, what if Jackson Arnold isn't elite? What if he's not a top 10, top 15 type quarterback? How far can this team still go? And to me, I don't know. I feel like that's a lot to ask him to be top 15 or top 10 in the country in his first year as a true starter. Obviously, he has the talent. He's highly rated. We hear good reports in practice, but I feel like that's such a tall ask. But I think that's the expectation amongst most OU fans, is that he will reach that top 15 type status. Maybe not outside of the state of Oklahoma. I think there's a lot of question marks there, but very high expectations across the fan base.
I don't necessarily think that it's too far of a stretch to expect that Jackson Arnold could possibly be a top 10, top 15 quarterback in the country. I mean, when you really try and look at, the premier programs across college football, some of the best programs that consistently put out high-powered offenses each and every year, Oklahoma, regardless of who's been a quarterback, they've always been able to find ways to, have one of the top, premier quarterbacks in the country. And I think the Jackson Arnold, when you look at the arm talent, you look at, the weapons that he has at his disposal, his skill set, his ability to make all the different throws across the field from the pocket. I think that Seth Luttrell is going to be able to do some really interesting things with him, especially given the fact that what Oklahoma's got at the backup quarterback position, which we'll touch on here in a little bit. But I don't think that it's too far of a stretch to think that Jackson Arnold could come out here and be a top 15, maybe even a top 10 quarterback in college football. And I know a lot of the talk, really kind of forecasting Oklahoma's projection as far as wins and losses go this year has kind of been predicated upon the ultimate performance of the offensive line. But I think the Jackson Arnold is a close second to that. They kind of go hand in hand. And if this Oklahoma football team is going to find their way, maybe to backdooring their way into the college football playoff, maybe they were able to put up a 9-3 type year, all things go perfectly, maybe a 10-2 type season. Jackson Arnold is going to be a huge part of this, because when you look at Oklahoma's schedule, some of the road trips that Oklahoma is going to be, going to face in enemy territories, some of the premier programs that are going to be coming to Norman, Jackson Arnold is going to have to, play A-plus 5-star caliber football at the quarterback position for Oklahoma to get where they want to. But no, I don't think it's too far of a stretch, Adam. I think that that's something that's highly possible. I'm actually going to pull that up right now to check and see, I guess, what quarterback efficiency would probably be the best statistic to kind of rate this as far as nationally. Who was that 14 or 15 guy last year?
Yeah, I guess that could be one good stat to look at. I guess in terms of like what I think of Jackson Arnold, I don't think he has to be top 15 for this Oklahoma team to be successful. Yeah, that would help a ton, but I think there's been a lot of rule changes over the last couple of years, whether it be the clock running after first downs. We're going to have the in-helmet communication that might cause teams to huddle up more often, or just the fact that Brent Venables' defense, as we expect it to be, should be top 5 in the SEC. And I think all those changes really help an offense not have to score as much as they used to, at least in Norman, Oklahoma. And so I looked at that and say, hey, could he be the number 21st best quarterback in the country? Not game manager, still a really good player, but just, hey, we don't need him to throw 40 touchdowns a year and run for another 10. He can do 35-6, and that's good enough. And Oklahoma is able to win 9 games. I think that's possible if the defense is really what we think it is, if our running game is really improved the way that we want it to be, and if we're able to kind of play in control. If our defense is good enough, maybe we're running the clock out a lot in the fourth quarter, and we don't need a lot of extra stats out of Jackson Arnold. So I think there's a possibility there. Were you able to bring up who number 14, 15 was last year?
Yeah, taking a look at it, and this is just going off the total QB metric. And again, we talk about premier quarterback play. Dylan Gabriel was actually ranked number 4th last year at Oklahoma.
Yeah.
Jalen Daniels at LSU was 1, Bo Nix at 2, JJ McCarthy at 3. If you go all the way back down here, kind of that 14, 15, 16 range, Drake May from North Carolina was actually at 14, and then our good friend Quinn down there in Austin, he was ranked at 15 as well, just one spot ahead of Brady Cook at Missouri. So again, I don't think that it's too far of a stretch, and Jackson's going to have to play well, make no mistake about it. But when you look at what this kid, the skill set that he possesses, the playmakers he's got around him, if this offensive line can come together, which we'll touch on that here in just a little bit as well, I think that Jackson Arnold has all the makings in the world of being a top 15 quarterback based on your QBR in college football this upcoming season.
What's interesting, though, is Quinn Ewers is a guy that OU fans and the fan base like to dog on a little bit. I still think he's a good quarterback. He's just not Heisman level yet. Maybe he will be this year. But I guess maybe I should phrase it this way, Tyler. If I were to say, hey, you could get exactly what Quinn Ewers was last year for Texas, and that's what Jackson Arnold will be this year for Oklahoma, would you take that, or would you take complete unknown at that point? I think I would take what Quinn Ewers was last year, because, you look at the team around him and you kind of think, okay, Oklahoma's defense could be somewhat similar to what Texas was last year. Our running game should be improved. Like, I would take that in a heartbeat and say, yeah, I'll take the odds that, that's the best he could be this year.
Yeah, and when you look at Quinn Ewers' stat line, he threw for 3,400 yards last year, 22 touchdowns, only 6 interceptions. He had a 78.3 QBR percentage. So
missed 2 games.
Missed 2 games. Didn't have his best performance in the Cotton Bowl against Oklahoma. He was pretty good the majority of the rest of the regular season. Once he got to the the playoffs, he got outdueled by Michael Penix. But what quarterback in college football over the last couple of seasons hasn't been outdueled by Michael Penix? But I think that that is a good question, Adam. And I think that realistically, if you could go ahead and take the card of what we're going to draw for Jackson Arnold this year, I would take what Quinn Ewers did from a production standpoint last year. But I also don't think that it's out of the realm of possibility that Jackson can't surpass what Quinn did a year ago.
Absolutely. We're not going to do this for every position group, but I thought it'd be interesting for the quarterback one, just to predict the stat line for what Jackson Arnold will do this year. I think it was through the Keyhole Pod. They basically said, hey, Baker Mayfield's first year in Norman, 2015, something similar to that. I went a little different direction with this one as far as like a player comparison. I thought Spencer Rattler in 2020 would be interesting. He had in 11 games, 3,031 yards, 28 touchdowns, 7 picks, 160 yards on the ground, 6 touchdowns with an extra game added to that. So just add a little bit more on each of those totals. I think that would be a very reasonable expectation for Jackson Arnold in his first year. A good year, not a whole ton of turnovers. Probably more production on the ground than what Spencer Rattler did, but I think somewhere in that neighborhood is probably where I would look to say, yeah, that would be considered a successful year, with probably the most important factor being the amount of turnovers.
28-7 was Spencer's ratio.
28-7. So if you say, hey, throw an extra 12th game in there, 30 touchdowns, 9 picks, I think that'd be considered a good year for Jackson Arnold.
I think you would 100% take that stat line at this point now, given what we know about Jackson Arnold and kind of the unknowns, the uncertainties about what the offensive line is going to look like, what Seth Luttrell and Joe John Finley are going to look like as co-OCs here at the University of Oklahoma for the first season. Yeah, I think that you would take that. And you just go back to, Dylan Gabriel's stat line a year ago, who was, he's playing in Eugene up at Oregon. There's a reason for that. And when Jackson Arnold is a huge part of that this year because of the belief, the buy-in, and the overall outlook of how Jackson Arnold projects as a quarterback at the collegiate level over the next 2 to 3 seasons. DG last year, Adam, I actually was kind of blown away by the rushing statistics here. He had 69% completion percentage, Very good. Outstanding for a Division I college quarterback. 3,660 yards, 30 touchdowns, 6 interceptions to go along with 12 touchdowns on the ground. Now, I don't know if Jackson Arnold's going to be able to put together, 12 touchdowns offensively on the ground. I think that he definitely has an opportunity to possibly reach that double-digit mark. But again, I think that 28-7 ratio that you alluded to, I think that that's a very, very good measuring stick. I think that that's a good goal to shoot for if you're Jackson Arnold this year. And again, the quarterback or the competition that JFA is going to be going up against this year is going to be a slightly different. It's going to be slightly better than what Spencer Rattler faced in year one back in 2020. But I do think that this is going to be an opportunity where outside of Marvin Mims, I think that you could realistically make a pretty good argument that Jackson Arnold has much better skill talent around him. Whether that's at the tight end position, whether that's wide receiver, running back as well. I think that Jackson Arnold and Adam, I just kind of want to get your thoughts on this as well. I know that Billy Bowman and Danny Stutzman and Woody Washington, for that fact, that they've come back for their final season. They chose to forego the NFL draft, choose to come back and kind of cement their final mark of their legacy here at the University of Oklahoma. But when you go back and you look at SEC media days, you look at some of the media scrums since fall camp has started, you look at some of the breakout sessions. I know that this is technically Billy and Danny's team, but you kind of get the sense in listening to some of his teammates, the way that they talk about the guy, the way that Jackson Arnold portrays himself, and the way that he carries himself in front of the mic and in front of his teammates. Kind of feels like this is becoming Jackson Arnold's team right before our very own eyes.
Yeah, I think you're hearing some good things about his leadership as it's progressed over the spring, summer, now into fall camp. And part of that is really that on the offensive side, like there's no offensive linemen that I would say are for sure leaders on the team. Maybe Jacob Sexton at best. Some of the newer guys like Branson Hickman probably have good leadership qualities, but just haven't been around long enough. So you see that. And then Nic Anderson, who we're going to talk about in a minute, I think he's shown some good leadership qualities. I think Farouk has done that as well. Mm-hmm. But out of the running back room, not a ton of guys there that are solidified. And so Jackson Arnold is kind of that dude. And I think we're hearing the right things. It's just a matter of like what happens in, week 4, week 5, when Oklahoma's down 14-0. Does that kind of crumble and fall apart, or is it completely solidified? Is everyone 100% behind Jackson Arnold at that point? So we'll see. I guess running backs, you just mentioned them a minute ago, as far as the surrounding cast that Oklahoma has. And kind of the name that we've been hearing quite a bit out of fall camp, and I don't know if I should buy it just yet, is JoVantae Barnes basically getting back to his old form from 2022. And we'll see if that indeed does happen. But we'll run some B-roll of him, well, if we can make it work here on YouTube, from his 22 season, where he had a really good, successful year, I think, in my opinion, as a true freshman, but really regressed last year, had some injuries, had some mental blocks, and just wasn't the same guy at all. But now it sounds like, by Brent Venables' words, he's the old guy, old JoVantae Barnes coming back.
Yeah, and I think a lot of Oklahoma fans, they're holding on to hope from what we saw JoVantae Barnes during his freshman season in Oklahoma, 2 years ago. Everybody remembers, the performance he had, the Batman and Robin with Gavin Sawchuk in the Cheez-It Bowl against Florida State. That really gave fans a lot of excitement, a lot of anticipation from what we were going to see from the running back position last year. And then ultimately, I know that a lot of things didn't necessarily go JoVantae's way, particularly, being able to stay healthy for a full season. The foot injury continued to bother him throughout much of last year. And when you really kind of look at how does JoVantae Barnes, forecast for this upcoming season? And I really don't want to go too far down this path, Anna, because I think that, as we sit here right now on August the 6th, is it too far of a stretch to say that this is Marcus Major 2.0 from the standpoint of I've got to see it to believe it? And I know that a lot of good things are being said. He looks fantastic, in his uniform. He's in phenomenal shape. Jerry Schmidt has done wonders for this kid over the last 7 or 8 months. But I'm just kind of at the standpoint right now to where I've got to see it to believe it. And I know he battled the injury bug last year, but he still only had 37 carries a year ago, coming into a season where many people thought that he was going to be the guy in DeMarco Murray's room. And when you look at what Oklahoma's got on paper, collectively, this is probably DeMarco Murray's most talented group on paper since he's been back coaching at the University of Oklahoma. We all know about Gavin Sawchuk with what he's been able to do: 9 touchdowns, 6.2 yards per carry last year. Finished the season with 5 straight 100-yard games. But this is the running back 2 position is huge because Gavin Sawchuk for each of the past 2 seasons, an inability to stay healthy for a full season. And now you're going into an SEC where you're going to be going up against a much more, bigger, faster, stronger, more physical front 7 week in and week out. So you've got to have a steady stable of backs at your disposal if you're Joe John Finley and Seth Luttrell. And I think that, yes, this does give a huge opportunity for JoVantae Barnes. But again, I'm going to have to see it to believe it. I think there's a couple more guys that we'll get to that I think I'm a little bit more excited about. I'm more eager to see them get some carries as opposed to JoVantae. But to put this on, spin it back here to you, Adam, if JoVantae Barnes can get back to what he was coming out of high school in his freshman campaign in Oklahoma, then yeah, Oklahoma's going to be pretty damn good, from top to bottom depth-wise at the running back position.
I'm going to share a photo for those watching on YouTube here. This is a photo
Length and girth report.
Randall Sweet, at Randall Sweet 5 for those listening on the podcast that want to look this up. He's from Sooners SI. Yeah. Basically, this is a picture he took from one of the open practices the other day. This is Kalib Hicks on the left, JoVantae Barnes on the right. I mean, that's about as good of looking running backs as you could possibly get. You got some guys that are absolutely built there. So, they certainly look the part. But yeah, I do want to see it. I want to see it to believe it with JoVantae Barnes. It's interesting because you look back at that 2022 season. I know a lot of us have tried to block some of that out of our minds, but I'm trying to remember, like, what is the most memorable moment that he had? Maybe it was like a 19-yard touchdown run versus TCU after Dylan Gabriel got hurt. Maybe it was I think he had a long, screen pass or something against OSU in Bedlam, but I don't know, just not a whole lot of moments for a guy that we had a lot of excitement about coming into the 2023 season and then just fell off the map. And so I'm interested to see. I love hearing the reports. I love that there's optimism around him because I want him to have success. I want him to regain form and, find the full potential that he had. But as you alluded to, there's some guys in that room that I think could do just as good of a job that, haven't had at least one season on their record so far that was disappointing, that, maybe they don't have the injury issues or they don't have the mental blocks potentially that might be there that could have success. And so behind Gavin Sawchuk, you look at it and is it Kalib Hicks? Is it Taylor Tatum? 2 really interesting names there that, just need an opportunity, it seems like.
Well, and this is why, and again, going into the SEC and, really even throwing the conference affiliation aside, anytime that you're playing at the University of Oklahoma with the opponents that you're going to have on your schedule week in and week out, you've got to have competitive depth at the running back position. You can't just simply rely on one guy to carry the load for a full season. It's just not going to happen. But I think that Oklahoma fans, going into the season, were looking to get back to what it was like when you had Samaje Perine and Joe Mixon as your 1-2 backs. You're looking to go back to when it was Kennedy Brooks and Trey Sermon. And Oklahoma just simply hasn't been able to get back to that point over the past couple of seasons. And we all know we've got in Gavin Sawchuk. And again, when this guy's healthy, when he's running behind his pads, when the offensive line is doing their job, Gavin Sawchuk is a top 5-10 running back in college football. And I firmly believe that. But what are you going to get out of that running back 2 position? What are you going to get out of that, running back 3 position? Who's going to be the odd man that gets left out? And I think that there's a lot of intrigue, obviously, behind Taylor Tatum, the number 1 running back recruit in the country that DeMarco signed out of Longview, Texas. There's a lot of intrigue about Kalib Hicks. You just showed the photo. Adam looks fantastic in the uniform. Probably the most impressive looking running back that Oklahoma has right now. He only had 3 carries last year. And this is a guy that's a little bit different frame, a little bit different size and stature compared to Gavin Sawchuk. He's got about another 15 to 20 pounds on him. But I think that when you watch what this kid was able to do when he had the ball in his hands for a few carries last year, you watch the way he totes the rock in the spring game, I think that Kalib Hicks has all the capabilities of being that running back number 2. And I think I even made the bold prediction back in spring football while we were watching this kid and, hearing some things from behind the scenes. I think Kalib Hicks has a very good possibility to where he could possibly be running back 1 by Tennessee or by even Texas. So I think that this kid just simply needs the opportunity to get some carries. And I think that he is going to be afforded that luxury. Now behind him, You talked about JoVantae Barnes. We've talked about Taylor Tatum, true freshman. I thought that it was interesting that Jackson Arnold made the point earlier this week when talking to the media. He said, obviously, anytime that you sign the number one overall running back in the country in Taylor Tatum, there's a lot of excitement. There's a lot of intrigue on how's this kid going to be able to run the football. But I think that it goes a long way when Jackson Arnold kind of highlighted the fact that Taylor Tatum's going to be a difference maker catching the ball out of the backfield. And that's something that Oklahoma just simply hasn't had over the past couple of seasons. I think that that's just another feather in the cap of Seth Luttrell, the fact that you can do some things throwing the football with your running back coming out of the backfield. And I think that Kalib Hicks is going to give you the opportunity to do so. I think that Taylor Tatum is going to be able to do so. And throwing it back to you, Adam, how do you get all these guys on the field? Who's going to be the odd man out in this situation?
Yeah, I feel like there's enough room for 4 running backs throughout the year, maybe not in one particular game, but I could see a scenario where the first 4 games of the year, it's JoVantae Barnes, it's Kalib Hicks, it's Gavin Sawchuk. One of those guys gets dinged up, Taylor Tatum comes in and he doesn't relinquish the position. He just continues to eat more and more carries from all the other guys. Yeah. That just seems to happen. I guess my question around, whether it be the number 2, the number 3 back, it's rare for us to see a third back go for more than 300 yards. So one of these guys is going to be odd man out. Maybe 2 of them, I guess you could say. 2 guys are probably going to combine for 1,500 yards, maybe more. And then that number 3 guy is only going to get about 300 yards, maybe 400 yards. I mean, not to put someone down or anything, but it's kind of like picking favorite children at this point. Who do you think is going to be your top 2 throughout, not just by halfway through the year, by the end of the year, just overall, who do you think is going to be top 2 here?
That's a hard question to answer because especially through the first 3 weeks of the season, obviously you've got Temple, the home opener, then you've got Houston and Tulane coming back to close out the non-conference play before you get to Tennessee. We all know we've gotten Gavin Sawchuk. I'm not sitting here saying don't play the kid because we're just trying to keep him healthy, get him to the starting line, get him to the gate. But I think that this is a situation where you're able to use these first 2 to 3 weeks. Obviously, you give Gavin Sawchuk 5-10 carries a game, knock the rust off, keep him fresh, get him acclimated back to playing live football. But I want to see the first 3 weeks of the season as kind of an audition. I want to see all 4 guys out there. I want to see Tatum. I want to see Barnes. I want to see Hicks. And I want to see Sam Franklin, who I think that many people, he kind of feels like the guy that's, forgotten in the room. But, DeMarco Murray, he made it a point during the transfer portal. He went out there and got Sam Franklin when there were other guys, out there primed for that opportunity as well. So, again, I kind of lean more on the side where if you've got Sam Franklin, who's a redshirt junior, or you've got a JoVantae Barnes, who's a junior, unless they are just clear-cut better than the other 2 guys in the room when talking about Hicks and talking about Tatum, unless they're just clear-cut head and shoulders better, I want to see the young guys. I want to see Kalib Hicks get his opportunity. I want to see Taylor Tatum get his opportunity the first couple of weeks of the season because, again, you might not necessarily know what you have until the lights are shining brightest. So throw those guys out there. Give them a few carries. Let them get out there and show them what they can do. But you make no mistake about it. You've got to have your top 3 set when Tennessee comes to town on the 21st.
I don't know if I necessarily agree with that particular statement because we've seen so many years in the past where whether it be Rodney Anderson that kind of emerges as the season goes on. Kennedy Brooks did that. I feel like there's room for that. I think you just want that stable of rotation of guys in there. It's just
yeah.
I mean, I think you just eventually want everyone to be able and ready to contribute at any point there. So I feel good overall, though, with where the running back room is at this moment. We'll see. I mean, we've been disappointed like we were last year. We thought it was going to be a strength of the team, and it wasn't. So on the flip side of that, we had the wide receivers last year that there was a lot of question marks. Now it looks like, okay, we've got a lot of things figured out. It's kind of like who's going to get enough snaps there, honestly. And then Nic Anderson. I know we've talked about Deion Burks throughout most of the offseason as a guy that we're all excited about, but I think Nic Anderson is the guy that's leading that room really based on what he did last year. He returns the most touchdowns to an SEC team this year out of any player out there. I know there's one guy that plays at Kentucky. He had 13 touchdowns last year, but those were at North Texas. Nic Anderson is the only player that returns to his team that has double-digit touchdowns in the SEC, and that was 10. So The guy was incredible last year. We saw a really cool video of him kind of breaking down the huddle earlier today in practice. So you love the leadership that you're seeing out of Nic. For me, it's just like, hey, I want to see more consistency out of him. And last year he was a redshirt freshman, but I want him to be a lot more reliable in terms of like, hey, every game, you're going to get 5 catches, 75 yards minimum. And not have as many games where you're just like, okay, like I know in Texas, he wasn't the starter. Andrew Anthony was, but 1 reception, 4 yards. It was the most important catch of the game, but we'd love to see more games where that's not happening. And he'll have a lot more opportunity being the starter more regularly, but I just want to see more consistency out of Nic.
Yeah, and I think when you look at the wide receiver position on paper, I think obviously Ole Miss sticks out, Oregon stands out, Ohio State stands out, but I think that Oklahoma, they've got a top 5 wide receiver core going into the football season here, starting here in about 3 weeks' time. But there's a lot of production that you've got to replace. And I know that, especially here on this podcast, and I think I speak for, most of Sooner Nation, where I don't think that Drake Stoops was ever fully appreciated for how good of a job he did in Oklahoma uniform. I don't think that really the amount of praise and the amount of flowers that this guy should be given. I think that that goes without saying, but Drake had 85 catches and 10 touchdowns last year. How are you able to fill that or replace that type of production? Obviously, everybody points towards Deion Burks coming over from Purdue. And when you just look at the way this kid moves, the way that he runs, from his time in the spring game and, the clips that Oklahoma's been putting out from practice over the last week or so. Yeah, Deion Burks is obviously the guy that everybody's going to point to. But Nic Anderson, who 6'4", 220 pounds, runs a 4.4. I mean, this is what you look for in a prototypical SEC, NFL type wide receiver. And I think that Nic Anderson is going to have the opportunity to, be that 1A or 1B, kind of the Batman and Robin with Deion Burks. But again, that is absolutely nightmarish for a defensive coordinator. The fact that you could possibly look over there and Jackson Arnold's got Nic Anderson out wide and he's got Deion Burks in the slot, and then by the way, you've got a couple other guys on the other side too that are that are no slouch whatsoever. But yeah, I'm very, very intrigued on Nic Anderson. From everything that we've heard and talking to some people behind the scenes, this is a guy that has really kind of taken on a leadership role. He's one of the older guys in that room now alongside Jalil Farouk. So I'm very interested to see how Nic Anderson is going to grow into, year 3 in the program, how he's going to, handle being, kind of the face of that wide receiver room going into the season. When you look at this guy's measurables, you look at the statistics, had 800 yards last year, 10 touchdowns, averaged 21 yards every time he caught the football. Yeah, I think that Nic Anderson is poised for a big year and what's going to be a pretty damn good wide receiving core that Emmett Jones has put together.
None of the returners have had 1,000-yard season. Andrew Anthony probably would have been closest had he continued to play last year without the injury. And I guess you could make an argument that Andrew Anthony, if he was healthy, Farouk, same thing, Nic Anderson, Deion Burks, maybe even Jaden Gibson could all have potential to have 1,000-yard season if they just kind of take over and say, hey, I'm the number 1 guy here. Maybe there's room for 2 guys to do that. But beyond those guys, you've got some youngsters. Well, Brenen Thompson entering his 3rd year of college, Jaquaize Pettaway in his 2nd year of college. But these are some guys that, especially Brenen Thompson, had more of a specialty role, I guess you could say, in terms of, go deep, catch the ball, try to score a touchdown, get behind the defense. And I'm curious to see what kind of role is he able to, carve out in this rotation, because there's a lot of guys ahead of him. You don't want to be known as just the guy that stretches the field. I think that gives the advantage to the defense when you're on the field. So I'm curious to see what type of role he's able to make for himself beyond just the go deep type of guy.
Yeah, but also at the end of the day, if you can't stop it, if you don't have anybody fast enough to keep up with the guy, then yeah, go long, kid, catch the football. And again, this is not me throwing any shade at Dylan Gabriel whatsoever. And like I said, I picked him to win the Heisman Trophy this year last week, but I think that Brenen Thompson's skill set probably plays better with the quarterback that's currently occupying the QB1 position in Norman, Oklahoma. You look at the arm talent that Jackson Arnold has. We saw it in the bowl game last year, simply not underthrowing the fastest player on the team. So I think that Brenen Thompson, he is going to have an opportunity, if he can stay healthy, to kind of carve out a niche in this offense. And again, I'm not saying that he's going to sit here and, get, 40, 50 reps a game, but there's no reason why he can't, get 7, 8, 10 reps a game and, have an opportunity to take the top off the defense. And Adam, you make a good point. You go down this list. You look at some of the guys that Jackson Arnold's going to have the opportunity to throw the football to: Anderson, Burks, Gibson, Farouk, Jaquaize Pettaway, that we haven't even talked about him going into another year as a sophomore. He only had 11 catches last season. I know that there's been a lot of talk, a lot of praise. Everybody's really excited about what Jaquaize is going to be able to do going into another year. And Andrell Anthony, who was probably a top 2 or 3 wide receiver production-wise in college football last year before he got hurt in the Texas game. He's back out there moving at full speed. It kind of feels like things are starting to progress in a pretty positive direction for Andrell. Hopefully we can get him back by the time conference play gets going. But yeah, the wide receiver position, Adam, it never ceases to amaze me. And I know that we bring this up, feels like about once every month, but the job that Emmett Jones has done from a recruiter, but also from a developer of his guys once he gets them on campus, this has gone from being a liability position on offense, basically since Lincoln Riley left, where I think you can make the argument that this is probably the strongest unit on this football team going into this season.
Yeah, I agree. I think it kind of is so strong that it makes you wonder, like, what type of personnel are they really going to run? Because I know the tight end room looks better than it did last year. We had Austin Stogner, who I think had 20 receptions, or the entire room as a whole, I think had 20 receptions for 252 yards and 2 touchdowns. Yeah. So the word out there is that Blake or Bauer Sharp is running with the ones. Jake Roberts is a solid number 2 behind him. But you almost wonder, like, yeah, it'd be nice if those guys are better and you could do some more concepts with the run game, but you almost wonder, like, why not just put 3-4 wide receivers out there more often, do 2 running back type formations as well, and just play your strengths of what your roster is. But
depends how well I was just gonna say, depends on how well your offensive line can protect.
Yeah, that's true, I guess. So we're going to see that pretty early, I think, with Tennessee coming in with James Pierce coming strong off the edge there. He's projected to be probably a top 5 NFL draft pick this upcoming May. So I think that will be one where we'll definitely want the tight end to be out there to help with protection on him specifically. But I don't know. It feels like a low bar to pass to be better than last year's tight end room. But I also am not. I feel like I'm not expecting a ton because there's just still a lot of unknowns in that tight end room.
Anytime the stat line for your leading tight end at the University of Oklahoma is 17 catches for 198 yards and 1 touchdown, I don't think that you're throwing shade whatsoever to expect more from that position and group going into 2024. And I think that with what you've got in Bauer Sharp and Jake Roberts, obviously 2 guys that have different skill sets. Jake Roberts, ultimately kind of more of an inline tight end, is going to spend more time on the line of scrimmage, blocking, maybe catching some passes over the middle, or, maybe out in the flats. I think that Bauer Sharp, brings a different dynamic at the tight end position that we haven't had since Braden Willis. Where, you're going to be able to do some creative things with him on the line of scrimmage. You can flex him out wide into the slot and do some things creatively. But it would not surprise me if it takes 2, maybe 3 games for Oklahoma's tight end room to surpass what we did from a production standpoint a year ago. And we haven't even talked about Devon Mitchell, who looks phenomenal in a uniform. Jerry Schmidt's been good to this kid over the course of the last 5 or 6 months. So again, not expecting Devon Mitchell to play, ultimately too much. I guess that it's probably either really good or really bad if we see him on the field this year, whether it's, from a health standpoint, or this guy's just simply the light comes on and he's too good, he's too talented to keep off the field. But I love where Oklahoma is at the tight end position, and I would expect the level of production to ramp up quite a bit, especially when you look at the track record and the pedigree of the 2 co-offensive coordinators.
I think the thing that I'll be watching the most as far as increased production won't necessarily be yards or even catches. I think it's just touchdowns. 2 touchdowns out of that tight end room is pretty brutal last year. I think you need to at least triple or quadruple that to like 6 to 8 at minimum out of the tight end room. And there's other guys there that I think are real weapons, specifically as a receiver. Caden Helms is one that he looks good. Like he looks kind of like I don't know, he's just long and kind of like you want, like, your typical small forward, power forward to look in basketball. And Cade McIntyre, he seems a little bit small, but I kind of like the few moments that we've seen out of him with the ball in his hands. So that'll be interesting to see. I would love, again, if one of the younger guys is able to break out and take a role from an upperclassman, because I think that usually means something good. But we'll see. Yeah, I just want that to be a weapon in the red zone. I'm not as concerned nearly as much on the yardage side of things with tight ends, I guess. What about
All
the
right, Adam,
offensive
let's
line?
get to the meat and potatoes. Yeah, let's get to the meat and potatoes of this. This is why everybody's here. This is what everybody's, I don't want to say worried about, but this is what everybody's going to be focused on the first couple of weeks of the season.
Yeah, and so Jackson Arnold met with the media earlier this week, talked a little bit about his relationship with Branson Hickman, some of the chemistry that's going on there. We'll play that clip from Jackson here.
It's going good. Starting to build that chemistry with him. He's kind of getting to the groove of things. Really came in the summer, and it's kind of hard to build a connection with the O-lineman in the summer. You got your OTAs, but you're not putting pads on. You're not actually going to war with those guys. So right now, just building that chemistry with him and just making sure I'm getting snaps under center and in the shotgun with him.
And that's kind of one of the interesting things is that Troy Everett's still seemingly recovering from his injury. I think we'll get him back somewhere before the first game. Maybe not 100% health, but at least practicing and maybe the ability to play in emergency situations. And then you look at Josh Bates. You've heard good things. Brent Venables called him out recently at one of his events. I don't think it was a press conference or anything. I think it was a luncheon that he specifically called out Josh Bates. That's encouraging to hear, but I kind of feel like Hickman is going to be fairly easy to predict as that starter at center because of the chemistry aspect that you need with him and the quarterback there. And he's getting all the opportunities right now.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that you've got to feel cautiously optimistic about the center position. And ultimately, Troy Everett before his injury in the spring, I think a lot of people had him pegged to be the starting center. Ultimately that was when you watch from his time at Oklahoma last year, you watch how he played, during his starting role at Appalachian State, particularly against Texas A&M, where they won at Kyle Field. I think that there was a lot of room for, confidence in what Troy Everett was going to be able to do at the center position, because I think he projects better in terms of holding up and playing at a high level, playing a high level of football at the center position as opposed to the guard, where I think you can get away with being a little bit undersized, which he kind of is compared to some of the other premier guards in college football right now. But the fact that you were able to pick up Branson Hickman in the transfer portal from SMU, that does give you an opportunity toward, yes, he is in a battle right now with Josh Bates. And the fact that you've got a redshirt freshman in a battle with a redshirt senior who has over 30 starts, at the center position, that goes along, or that says a lot about the performance of Josh Bates, over the last, spring camp, going into fall camp, summer workouts, different things like that. So center position is not something that I'm overly worried about going into this season. It's more what is Oklahoma going to do at the other four spots that's going to be catching my eye once this thing kicks off here in about 3 weeks.
So speaking of that, zooming out on the offensive line a little bit, we talked a few weeks ago about what our preferred lineup would look like for our starters. And it seems like Bill Bedenbaugh is in agreement on that as far as the first group that he's running out there: Branson Hickman at center, Fabici and Wiwu at right guard, at right tackle, Jake Taylor, at left guard, Heath Ozida, and at left tackle, Jacob Sexton. That appears to be, consistent reporting that we're hearing from different sources that that's the group he's running out there first. So you love to hear that. And at least he's saying, hey, I'm giving you guys the first opportunity to take hold of those starting positions and maybe not give them up. I'm sure he'll probably in week 2, week 3, week 4 still play around with other guys, but it's encouraging to know that that's what he wants to see first. I
think that you can definitively say that there's 3 guys that through the first 2 weeks of fall camp, those are guys that are going to be part of the Bills starting 5 rotation. It's Jacob Sexton at left tackle, Branson Hickman at center, and then Fabici and Wiwu at the right guard position. But that's when it kind of gets interesting. Where does Oklahoma go on the opposite side of the interior at the left guard position? We've talked about Heath Ozida, who has been, he's just been waiting for his opportunity to be able to get out there on the field. And he's been a guy who's spent a tremendous amount of time with Jerry Schmidt fine tuning his diet, making those gains in the weight room. And Adam, I thought that it was pretty interesting, the fact that when you look at who is a part of this, and again, we pick through practice footage, we try to find every little piece that we could possibly get from the minimum amount of availability where they actually allow you to go out there and shoot video footage. But I thought it was interesting that you've got a redshirt freshman in Heath Ozida at the left guard position that was running with the ones, but then you've also got a redshirt sophomore in Jake Taylor, who we've constantly heard good things about since he arrived on campus from Las Vegas. But the fact that you've got a redshirt freshman, Heath Ozida, and you've got a young guy in sophomore Jake Taylor, running with the ones ahead of a couple of guys in Michael Tarquin, senior, Spencer Brown, senior, Garen Hatchett, senior. That I don't know if that necessarily means that maybe the transfer portal wasn't as good to Oklahoma as maybe we thought, and what I think the fact that this is actually happening, I think that says more about the job that Bill has done in developing Heath Ozeta and Jake Taylor. And it sounds like these are two guys that are ready for the big show.
Yeah, I think this is the best combination of high floor, high ceiling group that we could possibly get. If we wanted to go even higher ceiling, I may consider like Logan Howland or Eddie Pierre-Louis, but I don't know if either of those guys are going to be ready, especially in week one. But I think this is kind of the mix you want. And we talked about this a few weeks ago as well, but what other offensive line out there is going to be able to say, hey, our left tackle has basically 3 years of starting experience in Michael Tarquin. Our backup left tackle, our backup right tackle, Spencer Brown, has 3 years of starting experience. Our backup center is Troy Everett. He's got basically a year of starting experience under his belt. So there's a lot of experience in that second round that hopefully can push that first group. If this is indeed the first group that runs out on August 30th against Temple, I'm sure we'll see a lot of rotation in that game for sure. But yeah, I think you really like the way this is shaping out. I think people are starting to come around to the fact that, oh, okay, like it's not as bad as what we thought it was. It's not going to be, it's not going to be a Joe Moore a winner. But I feel like there's just so many people that were just so destitute on this offensive line in the spring. And it's like, yeah, there's some new guys in there. We didn't have Branson Hickman at that point either. There's some guys that are still figuring things out a little bit, but there is an immense amount of talent, an immense amount of experience. It's just which piece goes where in this puzzle. And I think it's going to be figured out to at least top 30 offensive line this year.
And I think
I'm not as concerned about that.
That's a perfect transition into this week's length and girth segment. When you look at the average size, Adam, just say that those are your starting 5 offensive linemen right now. And again, we still have 3 weeks to go. Things could change. Make no mistake about it. Bill Beanbo, he likes to tweak with the different rotations, with the different starting lineups. But if you had Sexton, Ozeta, Hickman, and Nwaiwu, and Jake Taylor as your starting 5, you're looking at an average size of 6'4.5", 319 pounds. That's about what you want going, as a power 4 starting offensive line going into the SEC. And the fact that you've got a couple of guys who 6'6", Michael Tarquin, 6'6", Spencer Brown, both over 320 pounds at, backup tackle positions. And then you've got some good experience in Garen Hatchett that could possibly step in there to play one of those guard positions. You've got Troy Everett, who's got the flexibility to be both a center and a guard. And we haven't even talked about Eddie Pierre-Louis and Eugene Brooks, the 2 true freshmen that Bill is extremely excited about. I'm not sitting here saying that, we can kind of throw caution to the wind. The problem is solved on the offensive line. Maybe it's the fact that we're 3 weeks away from football season. I'm kind of getting myself psyched up to where, yes, I believe that this is an offensive line that's going to take us to where we need to go. But I don't think that right here on August 6th, I don't think that the offensive line is in as bad of a position as what we maybe thought it was going to be 2 or 3 months ago.
One position group that I think we'll have our eye on is that kicker position. That's where we'll round out things for our offensive preview next week. We'll talk defensive side of the ball, but you got Zach Schmidt, you've got Tyler Keltner, the transfer from Florida State. He didn't play there. There was already an experienced kicker there that was pretty entrenched in Tallahassee. So Keltner didn't have his opportunity. He originally started his career at East Tennessee State, was very good there, transferred to Florida State, didn't have the opportunity, comes to Oklahoma. So he's battling with Zach Schmidt there for that starting kicker position. Zach Schmidt actually increased his field goal percentage by about 5 points from 66% in 2022 to 71% in 2023. So he improved. It didn't feel like it. And it didn't get, it's kind of a shaky year really. And I that's tough. Like once you're mentally shaken, it's really hard to get back from that. So
yeah,
I feel like Tyler Keltner has to be the guy that you run out there against Temple, but I also feel like if you have an opportunity for Zach Schmidt to attempt a field goal in the fourth quarter or the second half, games well in hand, like I think you still want to do that and keep that competition rolling.
Well, and Brent's he's talked about this over the last couple of weeks where it feels like Tyler Keltner, he's the guy right now with a few weeks left to go before the home opener. It's really his job to lose at this point. And I think that the kicker position, there's going to be even more of a heightened focus on this position, being able to go out there and execute at a high level. And I'm not sitting here saying that, Oklahoma has to have the Lou Groza Award winner at the kicker position this year, because I think that, unless this is a situation where, it's 4th and 25 from the 20, Oklahoma is going to be kicking a field goal. But I think that realistically, you just need Tyler Keltner or Zach Schmidt. You need them to be able to, be 90% from inside 40 yards. And I don't think that that's too far of a reach. I think that from everything that we've heard, from how we've watched Seth Luttrell, the way that he called plays, the way that he likes to run his offense, this is going to be an offense that's going to be very aggressive. You're going to see a lot of, 4th and goes. You're not going to see too many punts. You're not going to see too many, 48, 52 type, yard field goals. So again, we just need these two guys, whichever one it is. You got to be consistent, make your kicks. Because Adam, there's going to be a moment, maybe a handful of moments this year in tight ball games where it's going to come down to the leg of Oklahoma's kicker on whether or not this team wins a ball game or two.
In 2022, we saw Brent Venables' strategy on whether to kick it or go for it not seem super great, in my opinion. I think we improved a little bit in 2023, but I'm also curious to know, how much does Brent Venables lean on Seth Luttrell for some of that now? Or is Venables maybe more engaged with that and less engaged with what the defense is doing on the sidelines? So it will be interesting to see there, because that definitely affects your kicking game. So a lot of interesting things that we really won't know the answer to, and probably Tulane. I think that's a quality opponent there. I think Houston is okay, but I think Tulane is one that I'll start measuring a lot of stuff once we play them as we head into that first SEC game against Tennessee. So that'll do it for our offensive preview this week. We'll be back next week to talk about everything on the defensive side of the ball. And then we'll have a schedule breakdown episode after that. And then it'll be game week. So we'll be previewing Temple here by the end of the month. And it'll be here before you know it. But thanks everyone for tuning in for episode 1 of season 5 of the Main Line. And we will be back next week for another episode.